Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. Now, today's guest is one of the coolest guys I have ever spoken with. In fact, I don't know how I managed to talk him down from paragliding or speed flying off a mountain in Utah to speak with me on a tech podcast today. But the topic that we're going to explore is how technology can develop and train teams and help them innovate when they're all scattered around the country or even world. Because we now have people who were recruited, onboarded, and delivering on a daily basis in their role without ever meeting their teammates in person. So how do we bring everyone together, make them feel a valued member of a team, and help them innovate together and collaborate better? Well, Marshall Mosher is a world record-holding action sport polyathlete, tech futurist. He also hosts of the Inside the Adventure podcast. But as the founder and CEO of Vestigo, he's bringing his passion for adventure into the digital world by building the future of virtual reality adventure. And he's doing this by digitally recreating the world's most inspiring and daunting adventure environments. And his recent VR team programs include working for the enterprise and businesses such as Microsoft and the CNN Emerging Product and Platform team. He's tapped into something with his business as he evaluates how teams are tapping into the power of virtual reality to harness their fearlessness to enable them to innovate and work together better. It is an incredibly cool story, so buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to Utah, where Marshall is waiting to speak with us now. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Neil. It's a pleasure to be here. So my name is Marshall. I am the founder and CEO of Vestigo, where we're building the future of virtual reality adventure. And we're using these adventure experiences to give remote teams the chance to come together over shared challenge-based experiences. Think of it almost like a ropes course style experience for your team, but instead of a ropes course, it's climbing Mount Everest or descending into some of the deepest caves, all in virtual reality, meaning we don't have to physically be together in person.
Wow, sounds incredibly cool. And as the founder and CEO of Vestigo, you are bringing your passion for adventure into the digital world by building this future of virtual reality adventure and digitally recreating the world's most inspiring and daunting adventure environments. All incredibly cool. But I've got to ask, what's your origin story? Where did your passion for tech come from? What made the worlds of tech and adventure collide? And what put you on this path?
Yeah, that's a great story. So I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, here in the U.S., and I was an only child, so I had to entertain myself somehow. So I would always be going outside and getting myself into some type of trouble, some kind of adventure, out in the woods. And when I didn't really know how that translated into adventure experiences until I got to college. I went to the University of Georgia, about an hour and a half away, and it had a really amazing program that would teach students how to do everything from whitewater kayaking to hiking to caving, and everything in between. And I really fell in love with the ability to use outdoor adventure experiences, especially ones that kind of terrified you, as an avenue for personal growth. So I really fell in love with it, both in the experience, the natural world, and the community in college. And that's kind of where my personal passion for it came from. But of course, I was always really interested in technology. I was someone who was always kind of an early adopter of all kinds of new tech. I didn't study in college for a tech background. I actually wanted to go to med school. And one of the reasons why I didn't go to med school was because I felt like it was a little bit too slow moving and bureaucratic from a technology perspective. And I got the chance to go to this program called Singularity University after I graduated, which is really where a lot of a lot of my passion and experience in the world of technology came from. And I was able to combine the two into creating a really amazing combination of adventure and technology when it comes to virtual reality, being the first type of technology that can really scale the feeling of an experience of not just watching something, but actually experiencing something in a digital way.
And fast forward to present day, you're now on this mission to level up remote teams with virtual reality. But can you set the scene and tell the listeners a little bit more about exactly what it is that you do and the kind of problems that you set out to solve with VR? Because I'm quite fascinated by this, because you're talking to me today in Utah. Lots of adventure activities out there too. So I'm interested in how you pieced it all together. So what kind of problems are you solving with VR?
Yeah, there's a ton of challenges when it comes to building a remote team. The interest in remote teams has always been here ever since technology has enabled us to work remotely. It's been enabling teams to be able to work together regardless of geographic boundaries. But of course, COVID has dramatically accelerated the adoption of remote work, sometimes forcing us to work remotely in this case. But remote work can come with a lot of positive benefits in the sense that you can live wherever you are. You don't have to have as much office space, which saves a lot of money. But the challenges are that it's harder to create lasting and powerful relationships between the members of your team, the employees at your company. So those relationships oftentimes are one of the key factors in determining how long someone will stay at a company. And of course, companies spend so much money on recruiting some of the best talent, sometimes for that talent to just leave after 6 months, especially when they don't have really any close relationships with anyone at the company because they've only seen them on Zoom. They haven't really gone through any experiences together. And from a psychological standpoint, experiences, especially shared challenge-based experiences, are what bring us together as humans, what creates that powerful bond. It's sort of the theme of most movies. The characters in the movie go through some type of big shared challenge and overcome that challenge. Due to overcoming that challenge, are bonded as individuals. So that is the theme behind experiential learning, which is the field of learning and development, which is all about teaching through experience. But of course, the key factor of that field has always been people being together to go through some type of shared experience. Well, now we can use virtual reality to replicate the feeling of going through that shared experience without actually being together in person. So I like to use the ropes course example because a lot of teams and people have gone through a ropes course type event where you and your team have this challenge in the form of this obstacle course built with ropes and ladders in a high environment, so it triggers that fear of heights. Well, a similar thing is going on in virtual reality, but it's not a ropes course. It's actually a recreation of some of the world's most incredible adventure environments that you would never actually be able to take your team to. But it's still psychologically recreating that challenge, usually in the form of a fear of heights. So an example is that we created an Everest crevasse crossing experience where when you're climbing Everest, the first step from base camp to the summit is crossing the Khumbu Icefall Glacier, which has these big cracks in the ice called crevasses in front of you. And you have to get across these crevasses by walking across these ladders that span the crevasse. So in virtual reality, the teams are tasked with the challenge of helping each other to get across this big virtual crevasse and walk across this ladder. So in real life, you're just walking in a straight line on your living room floor, your office floor, wherever you happen to be, because you're not physically together. But in virtual reality, you actually feel like you are on this rickety ladder over this crevasse. And if you fall, you plummet into the 200-foot deep abyss of ice and die. And people have a really hard time walking across their living room floor. It's fascinating how people don't forget that they're in virtual reality, but the emotional side of your brain triggers the same fear response as if you were actually there in person. So that challenge and the emotion with that challenge creates really powerful opportunities for experiential learning, relationship building that you really can't get without being together in person. And then those relationships drive all kinds of outcomes for remote teams, such as better communication and collaboration amongst your individual team members, stronger relationships, and more importantly, the ability to get out of your comfort zone, to push past your perceived limits and to navigate the unknown. And those are key factors for the innovation process in being able to create a new product and jump into the unknown in the business world, which also has a big focus on pushing through that fear of what happens when we jump into the unknown. So a lot of outcomes, all in the learning and development space for remote teams.
It's also incredibly cool. And I was just thinking, listening to you there, how for 12 months, for the vast majority of people, they were working from home without any interaction with their colleagues. And then now as people go back into the office, it's more of a hybrid approach. So only half of their colleagues are going to be in the office at any one time. So
right.
Do you have any other examples of how businesses are using VR to develop and train their teams? Because I would imagine this would be incredibly attractive to them right now, especially as we're approaching 2 years of everyone not being together.
Exactly. Yeah. Virtual reality is a really powerful tool for remote work. Most people think of it as, a video game device for their kids, which isn't untrue. But it has a lot of potential in the world of remote work as well. And more companies are starting to see that. You can do everything from create your own virtual office with virtual reality, an office where you actually have your team members around the same conference room as you, where you can all walk up to the same virtual whiteboard to create some new prototype together. Everything from that to technical training, when you're teaching employees how to physically do something, like let's say one of the airlines wants to teach one of the flight crew how to like walk around the airplane and look for any damage. You can actually physically walk around a virtual airplane and train people how to do these physical types of jobs without actually being together in person, as well as leadership development type of programs like what we do. So everything from physical training to leadership development training to virtual office space can be possible in virtual reality. And it's such a cheap tool compared to actually flying people together in person and other things you would have to pay for in order to recreate that in real life, that it's really a no-brainer. And companies are starting to buy these headsets on the scale of thousands for all their employees to be able to have this teleportation machine, in their arsenal of remote work tech tools. And that's starting to happen more and more.
And of course, businesses all over the world now are struggling trying to do more with less. And innovation is such a hot topic as a result of that. So how are you seeing VR being used to help the tech industry or any product teams improve their innovation efforts?
Yeah. So a lot of the focus of our experiences, in addition to the kind of generic build stronger relationships goal, is actually on the innovation piece. So there's a lot of training that teams will go through to help teams be more innovative and creative. And there's really not a magic, one thing that does that. But ultimately, a lot of the psychological research shows that the people that are more innovative are the people that are willing to take risks, because of course you can't try something new if you're not willing to jump into the unknown and take a risk with what's going to happen with developing this new thing. So your propensity for risk taking is a really big factor. So a lot of what we do is we use these experiences that your brain perceives as taking a risk, emotional, even though it's not, to actually train people on how to be more comfortable in taking risks, getting outside of your comfort zone, and building that mindset of courage when it comes to navigating the unknown. Just like the crossing experience I was talking about before, your brain automatically has this fear of heights for most people, not necessarily because there's something about heights that hurts you. The thing that people don't like about heights is actually a lack of being in control, controlling the situation of what happens when you fall off something high and the unpleasant outcome that will happen at the bottom. So it's really a fear of not being in control. And when we can use experiences like this to help teams realize that that fear is really all mental, it's a mindset thing, then we can really help teams to create a bit more courage when it comes to the innovation process of realizing that you are in control, because you do have the ability to decide how you react when you push into the unknown and when you navigate that uncomfortable environment, which directly correlates to teams' ability to innovate and create. So there's a little bit of psychology that goes into it, but the experiential piece has shown to be really impactful and helpful in that space.
A quick timeout from the interview to mention HireAct, the sponsors of the Tech Talks Daily podcast this month. So recruiters, are you or your business spending too long in your email and waiting for responses? Did you know that with HireAct, you can skip the headache of traditional hiring? You can view resumes, exchange contact info, and interview candidates in seconds. You can also get curated candidate recommendations that fit your job requirements. You can chat directly with your ideal candidates, accelerate your hiring process 10 times faster than those painful traditional ways. And best of all, it's a totally free download from the Apple and Google Play Store. So download HireAct from the Apple or Google Play Store, give it a try, and let me know what you think. But now, back to today's interview. So I'm curious, how do you think VR will continue to shape team development as people spend less and less time on site in the same office together in that physical space? How do you see it evolving?
Yeah, well, for one, it's weird when you meet someone in person because you associate their avatar, their virtual avatar, with themselves, and sometimes that doesn't look like what they actually look like in person. But it's definitely getting better and better. So right now we're still in the early days of virtual reality, where interacting with like for instance, if me and you were in the same virtual environment right now interacting, we would be seeing our virtual avatars and the mouths on our virtual avatars would be moving when we talk, and the hands would be moving in the same way that our hand gestures are moving in real life. But the facial expressions would be a little bit muted. And that's the biggest challenge with really replicating that feeling of being together in person. But apparently the new headsets coming out in the next few years will actually have the same type of sensor that the new smartphones have on them for Face ID now. It actually scans your face, and you can replicate all the expressions that are going on your face with this little LiDAR scanner on the front of your phone. It's the same thing that they use for those Animoji type things on iPhones. So putting that into the front of the headset facing inward can actually scan your facial expressions to be able to replicate those facial expressions on your virtual avatars. And that will actually be a game changer in what it feels like to be virtually together with someone else. So it's still a little bit weird. It still feels like you're kind of interacting with a cartoon, even though your brain forgets it after a while. But in the next few years, it really will feel like you're actually together with that person. I think the next 5 years will be a game changer in virtual reality, transforming the way we interact, and really not necessarily replacing the need to get on a plane and be together, but drastically reducing it.
And for the business leaders listening, do you have any big name use cases or anything you can share just to bring to life what we're talking about here? Because it feels incredibly forward thinking and almost groundbreaking what you're doing here.
Yeah, thanks. So we've worked with a bunch of really amazing, big name companies, like CNN, Peloton, EY, a lot of companies that are really focused on, for one, building amazing teams, and then empowering those teams to be at their best, giving them the tools they need to be most innovative and collaborative in a world that is heavily remote work driven. So especially for the CNN team, the main team that we worked with was the product team, really with the goal of helping the employees on the product team to think more like a startup, think more innovative, creative, and be willing to take risks and try something new. And when it comes to larger companies trying to be more innovative, like smaller companies, that factor I was talking about earlier, that ability to train your team to have a mindset of courage and navigating the unknown, is so important in being able to compete with some of these smaller faster, more nimble startups that generally have a higher risk profile. So it's been a really helpful tool for larger companies to help build the same type of mindset, almost like training that mindset, just like a muscle at a gym, to be able to be on the same level from an innovation perspective that you usually see in smaller, more startup focused companies.
Love that. And before you came on the podcast today, I did Google you and try to get a bit of research. Don't worry, I didn't find anything too bad, but I did find a great article by you on Forbes where you talked about why VR will shape team development as people spend less time on site together in these physical spaces. But can you expand on some of the key takeaways in that article for anyone that missed it?
Yeah, actually, so we've been working on a Forbes article and I didn't realize it was published yet. I'll have to go check that out. That's great to hear. But yes, so a lot of the insights are similar to kind of what we mentioned before, just with some stats on how virtual reality is impacting teams. But it's a type of technology that is very hard to explain, but very easy to experience. So I would highly encourage anyone listening to stop trying to understand it from just me talking. Find someone with an Oculus Quest 2, or just go buy one. They're $299. They're pretty cheap for what they are. Put it on, and your world will be revolutionized in the same way it was when you tried a personal computer for the first time, or touched a smartphone for the first time. It really is the next generation in computing that is very hard to understand without putting it on and trying it. Because people always, it's the same story every single time. And I've taught thousands of people how to use VR for the first time. People have just almost like a life-changing reaction in the sense that it's like if you brought this technology 100 years ago and they're like, wow, this is magic. People are blown away. And I can't stress enough the importance of just finding one, trying it, and you'll see for yourself.
And before you know it, you're ordering a haptic feedback suit, right?
Right. An omnidirectional treadmill, and you'll be a character in Ready Player One, which is a great movie to watch for visualizing what the future of virtual reality could look like.
Oh, I love it. And as the world is building a new future of work where we can work from anywhere, any device, any location, at any time, what excites you about that future and the role that you and VR will play in that future?
Personally, like we talked about a little bit earlier, I love the combination of adventure and technology. And that's really what I'm using to help empower people to have the outcomes we want from a leadership development standpoint. But I also personally love getting out in real reality and adventuring myself. So I'm definitely a habitual adventure sport fanatic. Love learning all different types of new sports myself and using these real life adventure experiences to help train my own mindset on pushing past my perceived limits. So I love the ability to be able to work remotely from some of the best adventure environments in the world while still leading these impactful adventure experiences in virtual reality for teams that might be halfway across the world. So like you mentioned at the beginning, I'm here in Utah, here at Salt Lake City, actually working from a kind of a remote camper van currently at the base of a place called Point of the Mountain, which is one of the most famous paragliding sites in the world. So I learned how to paraglide about 3 years ago, really fallen in love with it. And there's a kind of a subset of paragliding called speed flying, which if you've ever seen a social media viral video of someone on a paraglider going really fast, doing barrel rolls through mountains, low over terrain, that's speed flying. And I just started learning that a few days ago. So being able to learn from some of the best athletes in the world at one of the best locations in the world while still leading virtual reality experiences for people halfway across the world is pretty amazing for me personally too.
Oh man, it doesn't get no better than that. And as that conversation comes full circle now, I like to have a bit of fun with it, I guess. We began the podcast talking about your origin story. I'm now going to ask you, what has been the soundtrack to your story? Is there a song or piece of music that we can add to our Spotify playlist? Is there a story behind that choice too?
my Spotify music. I feel like it changes monthly in what I listen to. I do love soundtrack music though. And I don't think it gets any better than Hans Zimmer. For anyone who's into soundtracks, they'll probably know who that is. But he did the soundtrack for Inception, for Batman, for a bunch of really good movies, and some of those songs are pretty incredible. So I really love that orchestral soundtrack music.
Love it. And for anyone listening that wants to find out more information about what you're doing, how to contact your team, any questions at all, what's the best starting point?
For sure. Well, you can always reach out to me personally on any of my social media at Marshall Mosher. So Marshall with 2 L's. Instagram, Facebook, any of that. And you can, of course, go to our website, vestigo.co, and definitely reach out to us there as well as learn more about what we do.
Well, I'm going to be checking Vestigo out and the work that you're doing. Fascinated by that. But I'm also going to be stalking you on social to find out about paragliding and speed flying and all your antics you've been up to there. And
my last post was about speed flying, actually, so you can get a sense for what it's like. Yep.
Oh, man, I love that. I'll be checking that out. But more than anything, just thank you for coming on and sharing your story and the incredibly cool work you're doing there. Thanks again.
Yeah, thanks, Neil. I really appreciate it.
I just love how Marshall is using tech and tapping into the power of virtual reality to help teams harness their fearlessness to innovate and work together. It is incredibly cool. It sounds so much better than any of the team bonding experiences I've ever been on in the analog world. I mean, imagine climbing Everest or helping each other climb Everest through virtual reality. That sounds 10 times better than anything I've ever done. So I will be checking this out and learning a little bit more about that. And also, I'll be checking out Marshall's social stuff to learn a little bit more about speed flying, etc. But over to you. Any questions, comments, insights about anything that we've talked about today, or if you've done something similar, please, I want to hear from you. So email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com. My website is techblogwriter.co.uk. Keep those messages coming in, and I'll return again tomorrow with another guest. So thank you for listening, and until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.